Afro Tales Podcast is a part of the Connected Podcast Network. Chef. Yes, Glio. Don't you love how we get to share our stories and recipes? Yes, I enjoy it greatly. Do you know what makes it possible for everyone to hear us? Yes, Glio. Our voices, obviously. True, but it's also Anchor, a hosting platform that distributes the podcast to places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and others. Oh, yes. And isn't everything needed to make a podcast in one place? That's correct. And the best thing of all, Chef, it's free. Free, you say? Free. And all I had to do is download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So, you just had to download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Yep, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm and do what we're doing now. Fantastic, Grio. Simply fantastic. I know, Chef. I know.
This is the AfroTales Podcast, a show that will explore the folklore, tales, myths, and legends of the African diaspora. The Owl Women. One day, way back, in a reach among the hills lay a lowland, and in this hollow was a cabin all by itself. In the cabin was a whole hum and sigh of younger and elder women. Even a few youngins were there. All of them just in there talking and tittering back and forth. It was a whole lot of shaking and laughing of the elders and the young folks, hair gray or light colored, and long black dresses. They made over each other, said nice things too. They were friendly, mostly, like sisters to one another. Suddenly, they came knocking at the door. The elders knew the knocking had to be some poor stranger, bone hungry and tired. Strangers? With so little way from not eating so much? One of the youngest whispered to an elder. An elder whispered back, strangers floating on thin air, so skinny, looking for a handout. The women and girls giggled about the stranger, but they didn't let on they had heard. Nakatu, Nakatu. It sounded like almost gentle. The women never went near the door. They wouldn't let the few youngins near either. They kept on, just full of themselves, and they sat there around the fire, rocking and smoking their pipes. They told tales on one another and on their kinfolk too. They passed gossip along about people they didn't like and about nearly everyone else. They even got to talking about each other when one of them had to leave the little sitting room for a minute or two. Girl, Dora been putting on some weight which she can't see, but we sure can. And they giggled and shake at Dora's expense. Right then, there came a knocker at the door. The women rocked, crickety, crackety. They heaved themselves up to cook the supper. Some baked the bread and some made the stew. Knock, knock, came from the door, and the women paid no mind. They didn't even pause. They didn't think about who was there. They gave nary a peek at the door. Next, the women sat down at the table, and they ate until they ate up every bit of food, but for some dry dough on the breadboard. Knock, knock, came loud like that. The elders stuck up their noses at the noise, and some may have been part deaf. Still, the young folk had to hear all that knocking. Knock, knock, loud enough to wake the dead. Nobody asked, who's there? Or, is somebody hungry? No. Elders in their long dresses leaned back and just relaxed.
Who wants to cook for you?
They asked, laughing. Other side of the door, they hear, please, give me a piece of bread. The knocking been going on for some time now. Soon the women began feeling nervous. But they were bold enough to say, we cook for our own selves, but who is going to cook for you? The door came back with knockety, knockety, and real angry loud too, until the women found themselves shaking. It came so fast on them, they were scared. They heard knockety, knockety, soft and low. One of the young folk, Benna, couldn't take much more. Her hands flew up, her arms waved. That's just it. I've had enough. She took a bitty piece of dough and patted it warm while the skillet heated up. She dropped that dough in the hot skillet and it popped and sizzled. Well, all the women looked ashamed now, since they had left the stranger only the little piece of dough. They moved around the room, throwing up their hands and waving their arms down again. They couldn't stand to look at one another. They felt real bad. And they flapped their arms, blinked their eyes as if they trying to see behind themselves. That piece of dough swelled up so the lid lifted right off the skillet. The dough became hard on top and smelled strong. Well, it split the skillet apart. And the dough baked into bread so fast it rolled around on the hearth. And it rose high up the chimney. It rolled itself out on the floor, lifted up and rising higher and higher. The women felt frightened. They jumped up on the chairs, they perched up and held their skirts with their arms akimbo, and the elbows way out and their shoulders way back. The bread climbed over the chairs. The women had to scramble up on the chair back saying, ooh, ooh. All this time, the knocking is keeping on. Real low sound. Knock-a-toom, knock-a-toom. The elder women were too afraid to look at one another. They all were so scared and ashamed of themselves for being so selfish. They hopped up and down and hopped around, making funny clucking sounds in their throats. They blinked their eyes and kept turning their heads this way and that. All that time, the bread was swelling, rolling, and rising higher around them. Now they seemed to hear voices coming from everywhere. You don't give me. You will not lend. You abuse your neighbor and misuse your friend. Hush up, tell him. Quit that talk. no one, no more will you have the strength to walk. At once the women's legs became so weak they could barely step. They blinked and felt more ashamed of themselves, couldn't look at each other. They turned their heads clear around and quarreled deep in their throats, just clucking. And from outside they heard, "You wouldn't open the door to one so hungry and poor. Fly out the window. Anyone you see, go live out your days in the hollow trees." Now the bread had risen so high that only chink openings were left at the top of the windows. The women pushed each other, trying to get away. Each feared she'd be left behind. They left out the window chinks. As they went, each and every one of them turned into an owl. The elders and youngins and the young folk found hollow trees to live in. They will stay owls until they forget the bad things they told about other people. But till right now, they still talk about one another. Till yet, you can hear them calling from tree hole to tree hole. "Go home, Benny. Go home, Letty. Oh, why don't you go home? You. An elder calls. "You? Who? You? Go home. Go home yourself, Matty Lou." Until tomorrow, not one of them, not one owl woman can go home. The end. Wow, so that was fun. The owl tale today, the owl women, is what is known as a Pourqui tale, a Y-tale. These are fables that come from the old Negro slave speech dialect that you can find in like Uncle Remus Tales of the South. This story definitely shows why you should treat people right. Treat people how you want to be treated. Don't talk bad about people, or you might be cursed. But yeah, you can learn a lot from this type of story. It's about people getting what they deserve in a way. They really could have ended the curse quickly if they just stopped talking about people and treated people right. But they did not. They chose not to. So therefore, they're stuck the way they are. As the true owl, I believe they are the true owl, not the owl that you see with the heart-shaped face. They are the owl that you see with the look like ears or horns on top of their head. Those are the owls I feel like came out of this story. But I like owls. This is the reason why it's my logo, and I love the idea of the owl being the old wise teller. In other stories, you'll see owls will all seem to enlighten a character, and much like teachers and professors today, or the old white person in your neighborhood, male or female, not even just necessarily old, just the wise person. That's your owl. But those are your heart-shaped owls, heart-face shaped owls, not the horned owls. But yes, thank you and for listening, and I apologize for any burst of vocals. My microphone was recording a little loud for the episode, and I didn't realize it. But yes, thank you, and we should definitely do this again very, very soon. Have a wonderful day. iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you may listen. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at AfroTalesPodcast, all one word, and Twitter at AfroTalesCast. Please give us a like, a rating, and a comment so others may find us just as you have. Again, I'm Aman Mazinga, and this is AfroTales Podcast. Have a great day.